Cuyahoga Sound podcast. I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
Today with us we have Jack McLaughlin. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Cool local singer-songwriter. Cool. Band leader? You got a band too?
Yeah, I've got a group that I'm leading for my release party and for my release show. And I think we're doing 2 shows as of right now with that until I use my album to promote and try to get other players involved.
Cool.
Very cool.
Cool. So your release show will be the week this podcast comes out.
That would be wonderful.
Cool. Where is it at, and what day of the week?
So my release show, I wanted to, when I initially picked it in February, I kind of wanted something that would symbolize the start of like my career and the start of what I'm trying to do as a musician. And that kind of turned into, well, how about we do it as like the start of summer, you know? So that's basically why I decided on June 1st. And originally it was June 8th, but, you know, with the grog shop being very busy, I wanted it to be at a local venue that was kind of iconic in my eyes because I've only ever played at places that, you know, are the dive bars and the places around that are very cool at fostering live music. They're like, I want to give a shout out to C-Bars down in Euclid, 185th Street. That place is a wonderful, wonderful place, and you get to see a lot of great bands there. And shout out to them for keeping it real and keeping the live music scene pretty much alive in an era with people my age to where it's, you know, it's out there, but it's not as much as it was.
How old are you?
I am 20 years old.
20 years old. Cool. You'll be the youngest guy that we've interviewed so
well,
far.
Thank you. I know. If you guys can see, I can't even drink yet.
So, yeah, he's got an Arizona.
So I've got an
Arnold
Arizona
Palmer.
iced tea. Cheers, by the way,
Cheers.
guys. It's wonderful to be together with you guys today.
Glad to have you, man. Cool. I remember meeting you at a very awesome place. Can you? I want you to tell the story about how we met.
Okay, let's get prepared for this. So, my father, who's slightly out of screen here, he and my mother in 2017, when it was their anniversary, I don't exactly, I think it was like their 20th something anniversary, they went down to the Pilgrimage Music Festival because my dad kind of thought that would, or it was his 50th birthday. It was his 50th birthday. They wanted to go to a music festival because they're hip that way. They like live music and it runs in the family. So they went down there and had such a fun time down at the festival.
It's in Franklin, Tennessee, right?
Yeah,
about
it's in Franklin.
40 minutes south of Nashville.
It is, yeah, Franklin. Franklin's where all the musicians who are doing the Nashville circuit tend to live, which is what's really cool. So it's in all these famous musicians' backyards pretty much, and they just get a cow pasture and just make it into a music venue for like the whole festival. It's really cool, but anyway, I always thought that was very cool. And my parents were always saying, like, you know, it wasn't actually that busy. It wasn't that hard to get down there. And slowly but surely, they started thinking about an idea on how to get us down there with them to make it kind of like a family vacation. Because we've never done a family vacation centered around music before. And I love music, and my sisters love music. So it seemed like a no-brainer. So 2021 comes around. And we're like, yeah, we got to go down there. There's Marcus King Band there. There's the Black Keys there.
Marcus King Band was a late addition.
Yeah.
You remember that?
He was, yeah. I remember, what's his name? I don't remember exactly who it was. Someone pulled out. Yeah.
She couldn't make it. Coal miner's daughter.
I know, she couldn't, exactly. She couldn't make it, so they came in, and they ended up being a great show. And I guess before I go into how we exact met, I actually got to have one of my first like actual musician meetings while I was seeing Marcus King. I always learned from my mom that anytime you go to a show, like she told me the art of getting close to shows and getting close up front and how you just talk to people and you end up moving up front and you get to see the show in a better perspective. And I remember there was this girl who was playing on the main stage named Katie Pruitt, and she was a fabulous musician. And we listened to her song Out of the Blue, you know, like Out of the Blue. It was so nice. And we listened to it up there. So she was kind of one of the artists that we were excited to see, because one of the excitement joys of going to see a music festival is that there's a lot of artists that you haven't heard of before, or you haven't seen. So it gives you more opportunities to get into the new music scene. So I remember.
Yeah, we got into Houndmouth a lot after we saw them.
Yeah, Houndmouth. I think I actually missed Houndmouth seeing Katie Pruitt. Ironically,
I think we saw half of each.
Yeah, but I remember we saw her play, and she did a cover of Ohio by CSN, and my sister Abby was wearing a Kent State shirt, and of course, this being like 5-6 hours away from Kent State, it's not even close. They kind of popped the nice.
That's the Kent State bell.
Kent State gets
exactly.
the-
Kent State. My dad's a Golden Flash.
Yeah,
I hope to be attending there in the fall.
I went
very
there.
cool.
I went to the music school there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Kent gets mentioned almost every podcast.
Yeah, so we
Oh
ring
yeah,
the-
it's
we
a
ring the
great.
bell.
It's a great. There you go. It's a really cool. It was a really cool experience. My sister got on the jumbotron, and she was just like freaked out, like,
Oh,
"Why
wow.
am I on the jumbotron?" she could not believe why she was on there. So naturally, we loved her performance and thought she was ultra talented and fabulous singer songwriter. And I'm over watching Marcus King, and over to the corner of my eye, I see Katie Pruitt, and she's weaseling her way through the crowd as well, because I remember she said that she was having trouble getting backstage to see artists and stuff. So she's up front in the front row, and I'm looking over and I'm like, "Hey, you're Katie Pruitt, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I just saw you. You were awesome." So we struck up a conversation, and we ended up hanging out watching Marcus King for a little while, and that was totally cool. And Marcus King was great.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just to preface, before we met, I was able to have a fortuitous meeting with another musician beforehand, which was really cool. But then again, being that we want to speed things up a little bit, I'll get into where we were. So
I think they look pretty relaxed.
yeah, I'm the one with the energy, as you can see. But yeah. Anyway.
It's caffeine. That's what it is.
It is. I have natural caffeine.
go.
I'm pretty straight edge when it comes to substances, but just because I think that if I were to drink coffee, I'd probably explode. I have way too much energy. But I remember the Black Keys were the big headliner, and Dave Matthews Band. I like Dave Matthews Band, but Black Keys, being that they were from Akron, which is close to where we are, I thought that was totally cool, and I'd never seen them. So we got up front, and I managed to go with my sister Molly, and I couldn't believe how close we were. Like, wow, can you believe that there's so many people here, and we're right up front?
Well, we had to get there like an hour before it started to get that close.
I remember that. It was I remember my family and I. We really liked what was his name? He played like rockabilly. And my dad knows him. He does the song Northside. J.D. McPherson. J.D. McPherson, I remember, played there. And he was this kind of old school rockabilly artist that I was like, oh, this is cool music. So we were there, and he was playing right before the Black Keys. So we were like, all right, we'll see here, then we just won't leave. Yeah. So we did. And I'm watching the Black Keys. They're getting on, and they're rocking the house. I'm wearing a Beachland Ballroom shirt.
That's right.
And I ended up getting kind of a quasi shout out from Dan Auerbach, who was just like, any Cleveland people, and he looked over and he saw me, and you were yelling too, and I look over and you happen to be right in the front row as well, and you look over, you're like, you're wearing a Beachland Bar, should I go there all the time? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
We're in Tennessee. And it's just funny because
he shouted out Euclid Tavern on stage
exactly.
too.
Yeah. I never got to see the Euclid Tavern. My dad's played there before in the 90s, but I never got to see it, sadly. But anyway, yeah, I thought that was totally cool that somebody recognized the Beachland Ballroom who wasn't one of the guys who I knew was famously from Cleveland.
That was their very first show.
Yeah. And it was really cool. And you mentioned to me that you lived in Euclid, was it? And I mentioned to you that I grew up there, which was totally cool. My dad was a councilman there for Ward 5. So any Ward 5ers out there, my dad helped you guys out for about 5 years. So I'll drink to that. But anyway, I thought that that was totally cool that we had a fortuitous meeting that we were able to talk a little bit about while we're seeing this band out in Tennessee, as far away as you could get from Euclid, Ohio. And we're talking about, like, you got to come on my podcast sometime when you come in. I'd love to talk to you. You got such a fresh, young, vibrant energy. I'd love to talk to you. And I was totally cool, and I got your number. But I don't think you exactly – I'm not sure if you got mine or not, because I remember I went to – because time moves on, and we got home eventually, and school started up, and I was pretty much busy, so I didn't have a lot of time to think about, like, fortuitous meetings. So fast forward to – was it earlier this month, I want to say? Mm-hmm. My dad and I are like, he had a buddy come in from Peru who was a rock and roller friend and was in the same kind of combustion field that my dad is in. So naturally we're like, we got to go out and see a local show, There's what more authentic experience.
Where was he in from?
He was in from, was it Lima? Lima, Peru, yeah.
Peru,
Lima, Peru.
Right.
And totally cool. It was an old school rock and roller, so you can't get the more authentic experience than going and seeing the Rock Hall than going to see one of our local venues.
The funny thing about that, where we saw each other, the bands that opened up that trail for Sensi Trail, who you guys met at the Rock Hall, that opening band, Lake Erie, they were the ones we just interviewed. They're going to be the podcast.
No way.
The week before this, they left like 10 minutes before you got here.
Wow, well, that's awesome. That's totally cool. It's a small world.
Later in my pocket.
Oh, so do I. They just gave us some rolling papers.
Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Shout
so
out
cool.
to Lake Erie.
Yeah, we had them packed, and
That's
that was
awesome.
the most people we fit in for the podcast.
That's right. All 5 of them were here.
Wow, that's because this isn't a huge room.
No,
That's
yeah,
pretty
one
cool.
of them was right in between.
Yeah, apologies for
Nice.
the audio on that one. We were trying to get mics wherever we could.
Well, that's all right. This is a nice mic. Again, I'm naturally looking at these mics because
The
I go to
2020.
I go to a school where we learn all about audio transducers and all that. But I'll expound upon that in a little bit. But anyway, when I eventually got to see the show, and I think the headliner were Sensi Trails,
Right.
and they were really awesome. I run into you, and as I'm walking in, you and your wife or girlfriend? Girlfriend. Look over at me, and you're like, "You're Jack," and you recognized me, and I was just like, wow, they just saw me for a split second and instantly recognized that I was the guy who they saw at the music festival.
Well, I'll admit, we've been looking for you. There was a couple times where we were like, is that him? No, that's not him.
And how funny is it that our next meeting happens to be going to see live music again?
Yeah.
I'm almost starting to think this guy likes live music. But it was really cool, and I had a lot of fun getting to see another band with you. And finally, that's when you kind of decided, instead of having to wait until fate brings us together again, why don't I just orchestrate it right now and have you down on the podcast? So, yeah, here we are.
And it's perfect timing. You got a single out just a few weeks ago, and the album's coming out in a couple weeks. Well, this week.
Pretty much this week, yeah.
This
The album is actually, we're doing the finishing touches on the album right now. I don't know why, but I tend to be more productive when I'm rushing things, when I know that, like, I don't have an infinite amount of time to work on something. It kind of lights a little bit of a fire in me.
Absolutely.
So basically setting it to where, June 1st, having the date of when the show's going to happen kind of made me think, all right, so whenever the show is, about 2 weeks before, that's when the album's got to be out, which is pretty much now. Yeah. So it's going to come out very soon. And I've got my buddy working on the artwork right now as we speak, and got it's all a very homemade DIY approach. I've got my sibling, my sister Molly. She's writing liner notes on a typewriter right now as we speak too.
Cool.
So we're all going involved in this, and you try to employ a little bit of a committee to help you out, so I don't have to do all of it. But yeah, it's really exciting. The single Another World. I've never released anything as myself before under my name, so that was kind of a big deal personally for me to where I was like, wow, this is something that I can go on Apple Music, and if I want to, I could put it in a shuffle playlist where I've got like the Beatles and the Who and like all these artists I admire. I'm just like, wow, that's my song, even though of course I know there's no fan base yet, but it was just something that kind of always gives me a little bit of a buzz when my song comes on a playlist. I'm like, oh my God, that's my song.
It fits. You got that late 50s, early 60s rock and roll vibe.
Exactly. Yeah. I've always been really big. I'll just get out now with my influences so it doesn't take the entire time, because I could talk all about my influences, because when it comes down to it, I try to make music that is influenced by the stuff that I'm passionate about, because what other point is there to make music than to make music that you enjoy and at least have fun making?
Yeah.
You know, whether or not I listen to it after, I always wanted to, my dream was once I learned how to play an array of instruments, I kind of always wanted to write music that, you know, had some of the similar characteristics as the music and the artists that I admired, which I guess the oldest one would be Buddy Holly, probably. I'm a big Buddy Holly fan. I like his simple yet effective approach to songwriting, and how what I always liked about him was pretty much the same reason the Beatles liked him, is that you listen to a lot of those mid to late 50s guys, and they're very blues driven. They're very and this is where I'm going to get a little theory based, but they use what's called the 1-4-5 progression a lot, which is that blues progression. And it's usually like when it became rock and roll, it became sped up, and so it wasn't really the blues, but it was still that kind of shuffle feeling. And then Buddy Holly came out here, and he was doing songs that were like E, A, and B, the same type of stuff, but he was doing it in a more melodic fashion. He was focusing more on the delivery of his lines and not as much about having this blues kind of feel to it. And yes, like his early records sounded, but I really think that where he was going with his direction was more into a melodic type of sound. And I think that's what the Beatles really admired, which leads me to the Beatles. And what can I say possibly that hasn't been said before, other than they really were the groundbreaking band of bands. They just knew what to do. It seemed that they could do no wrong. They already knew that there was they didn't have to break the barrier that Elvis broke, which was get a bad manager, have people put you in really bad movies. They knew all the tropes already. So they were that first real band to where they kind of already knew the bad effects of rock and roll and what can happen, because Buddy Holly died. You had Eddie Cochran in a car crash at 21. So all these artists that they admired, and they saw kind of how things were kind of going wrong. So they kind of learned from that, and right off the bat had a very good manager in Brian Epstein, and were able to make wonderful melodic music that people like me still enjoy. And as a 20-year-old listening to music that was 40 to 45 years older than me, before I was even alive, it speaks volumes of the quality of their work.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very influenced by them. And more importantly, I love all their work, but I really love their early stuff the most. I'm really crazy about their early stuff, which most people, when you talk to them, I've seen really appreciate, their I Am the Walrus, Sgt. Pepper's, Abbey Road era, and that era's flawless too. But I guess if there's anything somewhat unique about that I can say that's different from what most people say, is that I absolutely adore their 1963 output. I love when they were doing the Live at the BBC stuff, Pop Go the Beatles, and I loved their early approach to where they were doing a lot of Buddy Holly type covers, and it was heavy emphasis on harmonies and very pop melodies that were done in a 3 to 2 minutes and 30 seconds kind of time frame. Yeah. And they became, before they became the biggest band that everybody loved and that everybody thought was super groundbreaking, they were just very, very good at making 3-minute pop singles. They were very good at it, and I think arguably they became the best at it at that period, where they could just, every song could have a nice melody with drums, bass, and guitar, and have a very cohesive song that just you can listen to over and over again and seemingly never get tired of it. And that kind of thing always made me interested. I was like, if I'm ever going to do this music thing, this songwriting thing, that's what I got to do. Because I listen to a lot of the music that I hear now, and I'm not gonna say that it's all bad or anything like that, but you listen to the modern day songs, and because I love pop music, I do love pop music, and when I hear it on the radio, I'm like, okay, I can hear, and while I may not like the usage of electronic music more than the drums and the guitar and bass that I grew up with, I can still appreciate a good melody when I hear it. And something that I guess I've just noticed when you listen to top 40 radio is that they have a song that seemingly the Beatles would have made a 2-minute, 30 to 3-minute pop song, and they seem to feel compelled to make it a 6 to 5.5 minute song. So it's like it has a chorus that just, once the song's over, it feels over, and you don't really feel the need to want to listen to it again. And that's kind of learned that. I was like, you know what, songs, like, there's a difference between songs that have enough musical turns to where, you know, you don't mind it as much. But with songs like what you're typically hearing on Top 40, I feel like the point that they're trying to convey would almost be more effective with a smaller time frame, because then you get replay value. And then, like, on some of the great pop songs that I hear, once I hear it enough, I'm like, wow, and it just ends and it leaves you wanting more. It's that classic trope that my dad told me from a very early point on, that, you know, leave them wanting more. Don't throw all your tricks into the bag. Don't make everybody hear everything you do and then not feel compelled to want to investigate a little more. So the song Another World, I actually was having trouble making it even longer, because I think the original track list of it, or time frame, was 1 minute and 33 seconds.
Wow.
And I had to pack in that much melodicism and hand claps and all that stuff into 1 minute and 33 seconds. It's kind of a lot, so I got a little longer. You know, I'm at 2 minutes and 2 seconds. So
What did you add to it to give it that extra 30 seconds?
I gave it an extra verse. All I needed was an extra verse, really, to get it better.
Did you repeat a verse or add new lyrics?
I had to add new lyrics, and it was one of those things that it wasn't hard to add new lyrics to it, because I think I try to keep my lyrics very simple. I don't try to overcomplicate anything if it doesn't need to, and especially with the type of genre and that type of 60s power pop style that I'm going for. You know, you listen to those songs, like, they manage to convey what they're trying to say, and not in an overly dramatic or overly cheesy way. They just pretty much just tell it like it is. And I always admired that. So again, when you're trying to write lyrics like, you know, I know that I need to go to another world. When you're making lyrics that kind of have that melodic flow, and you're kind of expounding upon that, like, you know, I see this girl from across the hall, or in another field, makes me feel a different way. And, you know, I just try to keep things to where, you know, instead of overly explaining the feelings of my lyrics, I try to kind of make the music and the vibe kind of almost do that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it wasn't too difficult to do that. I could play it for you if you wanted. I could play the single. Would that be something that you guys would want?
No, let's tell people where to find it.
All right. So I would say
we listened to it.
Nice. So I would say if you're interested in listening to Another World, I would go on Spotify and Apple Music. I have it on both of those platforms, and recently I was just enlightened that it's on Instagram as well. So if you guys are into that type of thing and you want to investigate music that sounds like it's from 1964, I will be releasing my album on probably within the week, and it'll be on pretty much all the major platforms that you can think of.
So with your approach to recording, do you take that 1964 into the studio as well? I know you're talking about your sister using the typewriter to come up with liner notes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, is this album in mono like the old Beatles stuff, or how far are we going here with the retro?
I would say I could make it. It was a fine line to where, and my dad's a wonderful producer, and I'll shout out to Jeff Zika as well, who's also a really good producer. But what I thought was really cool was that, you know, I love the way those old records sound, of course, but I'm not entirely sure a lot of people listen to music that has a ton of that type of sound as well. So, it's kind of a compromise. You find what you think works, and you keep what you think is essential to the songs. And then, all the songs are in stereo. Yeah. I try to at least throw in a little modern touches here or there so that it's not a complete retro fest, which I could easily do.
Yeah.
But, I don't want to just be labeled as just a retro artist. You want to kind of take what you admire and kind of try to find new ground with it.
Yeah.
So I will say, for the recording of the album, being that I go to a recording arts school currently, and you guys had David Kennedy on, and he is my instructor for my big recording lab class. I just graduated from that. So
congratulations.
Thank you. But anyway, I kind of learned all about the magical world of production and how basically good production can really make a song. So naturally, I begged my dad to get the Waves Abbey Road plugins because I can't afford like the Alltech compressor. I can't afford the Red 17 board.
Not many can.
Yeah, I think there's only two boards. There's the Red 17 and the Red 37, and Lenny Kravitz has the 37, and Abbey Road has the other one. So now that I'm not in England anytime soon, the best bet for a kid like me is to get plugins, and Waves I think makes really good plugins for especially the price. Jeff Emmerich could almost be fooled sometimes with some of them. So if it's good enough for that, it's good enough for me. And I put all of that on my album. So I basically ran all of my signals through a Red 37 and a Red 17 board, which was the studio board that George Martin operated on. You see it with the big knobs and everything. And it gives it that natural sound that it sounds like it's coming out of Abbey Road Studios, to where, if you compress it a little bit too much, you start to hear some crackles, you start to hear some pops. So it's got a lot of that. So I did stuff like that. To answer your question, I put it through the stuff that I thought was essential for my liking of it, but also I made sure that I still put modern EQs on it. I still had graphic equalizers, kind of making the sound a little bit more tailored than what George Martin was able to do. I'm able to get a 7-band EQ and move the faders up and down and kind of really dial in what I'm looking for, and I can seek and destroy the frequencies that I don't want, something that I don't think back then they were really able to do. So I can take the good from the era that I love, but also without the drawbacks of it. So I'm only using the pluses from that recording gear. I don't have to deal with any of the negatives of what they used to have to do, which, like Jack White and J.D. McPherson, who use strictly analog gear. While that's a really cool thing, I'm sure it probably takes a lot longer to make a record because, they deal with if something goes wrong with the machine, there goes some of their song, There's good and bad from both eras, and like Trent Reznor thinks, it's never wrong to have just one or the other. You should kind of have a hybrid of them, because I think it benefits from it.
Yeah, tape's not cheap either.
No, especially in the era and with a lot of practical reasons. You can't go wrong with Pro Tools. You can't go wrong with Studio One, which Studio One is the one that I use currently, and I like the layout. But yeah.
A couple months ago, they just re-released the Beatles one, completely remixed on Apple Music.
Wow!
And it was great because they added spatial audio to the later stuff that was in stereo, so it gives you that 3D sound. But they kept the mono tracks are in mono. They didn't touch those. They left them as they were.
Because they shouldn't.
So you can kind of follow that progression where it was the Beatles and those the songs that were all about the song right there, and those 2-minute things, and then all of a sudden it opens up and you get to Rubber Soul.
So it's almost so basically it shows this in audio world. It shows the progression, the leap forward in that, and that's totally cool. And I also like the fact that they don't mess much with the mono mixes either, because really, if you want to listen to the genius of George Martin, all those mono mixes, when the Beatles were releasing stuff up until even around Revolver, they weren't really, stereo wasn't really prevalent, so mono was the way most people were listening to their music. So the Beatles are famous for having said that they put way more time into making their mono mixes sound good and not as much time into their stereo mix. So when you get an early record like with the Beatles from November of '63, you know, they make it to where you can pretty much hear drums in one side and then the vocals in the other, and you know, but it wasn't really like that when the records came out. And I feel like a lot of times, like I saw, to go along with you saying like the young perspective of how they view the music and stuff, I saw this video, I don't remember if it was on Instagram or something, to where this kid was basically saying like that moment when you're trying to listen to Beatles songs and he was listening to it, and when he took one earbud out, he only heard drums, and when he took one in, he only heard vocals, and he thought that it was just like bad mixing or something like that, and he didn't really know why that was. And I remember watching that and thinking, it's called stereo. That's why you hear it that way. And someone told him about that in the comments, and he was like, "Oh, that's stereo? What's stereo?" So like, I guess a lot of people don't really, unless I think people who really truly care about stereo and mono and all that, we're a very finite number of people in this great world, you know. So
there's a good video of Lemmy from Motorhead walking around like a Coconuts music or something, looking for a Beatles mono mix, and he was all pissed off. And there was a lady in line like checking out that had the mono mix.
I remember that.
She's like, she gave it to Lemmy. She's like, she could get it.
See, Lemmy knew where it was at. Those mono mixes sound
like,
incredible.
The
There's no reason to have. I mean, it's cool. When I was little, I thought it was cool to do kind of like karaoke, to where I just hear Ringo's drums and the bass, and just turn up a little bit so I just hear just enough guitar but still not enough vocal, to where I could sing along with John Lennon, and I thought that was really cool. But from a practical standpoint, mono's where it's at. If you're listening up until around 66, mono's really where it's at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. We started touching on your influences past the Beatles. Let's continue with that.
All right. So past the Beatles, because I started initially on drums. I grew up playing drums, and my progression to music up until just very recently was pretty much determined by the drummers that I was getting into, and that's how I got into the bands. So, you know, I used to literally do the old school thing of putting a Beatles CD on my headphones, on my player, and playing along to Ringo's drum beats back when I was like 9, 10 years old, and just trying to match all those early fills, all those early drumming. And I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And then I'll never forget the life-changing moment when I saw a video from 1965 of The Who playing Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere on Ready, Steady, Go, which was, I think, an ITV show. And I remember watching, I was like, oh, so this is like, because up until that point, I really didn't listen to anybody except the Beatles and the occasional girl groups, and I was really into Leslie Gore and like all those early 60s stuff that the Beatles were into. And then to see a band that it was in black and white, and when you're 9 or 10 years old, you're like, oh, black and white? This must be like the Beatles. So I'm watching it, and from right off the bat, I'm like, whoa, you can do that on the drums? It blew my mind watching Keith Moon doing this elephant arms type delivery all over the track. And then, of course, because what I love about that track is that it starts off kind of like the Beatles, to where it's a pop melody, you know, I can go anywhere I want to. It's like it's got all the similar Beatles tropes. Then right around the like minute 30 mark, it just goes crazy, and Pete Townsend messes with the feedback on his guitar, and Keith Moon's just destroying the drums. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, I remember a light bulb switch where I was like, wow, this is cool. And then that got me into my second big influence, which is The Who, you know, and more importantly, like the early Who. That's that whole power pop, like, because I believe it's from an interview when Pete Townsend was talking about Pictures of Lily and promoting, which is my favorite Who song. I think it's got everything that I like in music. Someone asked him what the music's called, or like, what do you call this? Because it's a very Beatlesque melody, but it's got powerful drums, powerful guitar, powerful bass, like everything. It's like the Beatles, but everything's 211, you know, Spinal Tap. Yeah. So he was asked about that, and he said, you know, it's kind of, I guess I would call it power pop. And he described it as being like, you know, it's like the records of like we use the records of like the Small Faces and the early Beach Boys stuff, and like that's what he was pretty much saying is like power pop, and who would know that that would later be used as the defining moment of a new genre. But, he didn't know that. He was just writing tunes that were very Beatle-esque because he was really influenced, despite what he'd tell you in interviews saying that, no, my music is the only music that matters. No, Pete, you were influenced by John Lennon. I've read your Melody Maker magazines. Like, you can just see it, And everybody was influenced by them back then. Yeah. But The Who in particular, I just remember that light bulb moment of when you could take the melodies of the Beatles and mix it with the ferocity of The Who to where it's something that I had never seen before. And being 10 years old and doing that naturally, I would get down back in my drums and try playing everything that Keith was doing. And I noticed right off the bat that you can't play everything perfect to play Keith Moon because half of the times he didn't know what licks he was playing. So when you're listening to it, you're like, wow, that's a really unusual lick. How am I going to remember that with this one? It was instantly more challenging than Ringo's because Keith's fills weren't memorable in the same way that Ringo's were.
Yeah.
Ringo, you listen to a Beatles album, and I'm so sick of the Ringo bashing when people are just like, oh, I could drum better than Ringo, or then they try to bring up that, like, John Lennon once said that Ringo wasn't even the best drummer of the Beatles, which was actually a comedian who said that. And to put that finally to rest, Ringo doesn't deserve all the hate.
No,
but
when it comes to drumming for the song, I don't know that anybody does it better.
Bingo. The reason the songs are so good, the way I would say it is, if you had Keith Moon with the Beatles, he would have ruined it. The music, there would be no dynamics, there would be no like memorable fills because Keith Moon just would have done what he does best, which is Keith Moon. Yeah. Or like like he did that like train like like kind of train falling down the steps feel.
Yeah.
Where Ringo, he would listen to the song and think, all right, I'm gonna try to come up with this and like Ticket to Ride. Like I guarantee you Keith Moon would have done his classic, like just would have gone crazy on it. But Ringo just listened to it and it was just like boom, clap, boom, boom, clap, clap, boom, clap, boom, boom, clap. And the reason, yes, it's simple, but also I can't think of a better drum beat for that song.
Well, he builds that up each
Exactly.
verse. It picks up a little bit.
It does.
I played that in a cover band, Summer of *65.
And you were in a cover band called Summer 65?
Yeah, I filled in with them.
Do tell about this.
It's my friend Mike Bestel, who I had played with in a basically a hard rock band for a while. They had called me in to do some fill-in shows, and it was really kind of throw me off a little bit because like I would be like playing in a Motley Crue tribute band, and then he'd be like, "Hey, we need to this weekend."
Now you gotta play Ringo.
Oh yeah. So I was like, "All right, cool." But it was great, and the crowds at those shows, they were all elderly, but they were so into the music. They loved every song.
I can completely attest to that because I go to see this band. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine.
When I was 14 years old, so about 5-6 years ago, when we recently moved into our new house, we had a neighbor across the street who's in his early 60s, and he knows all the music, all that British Invasion stuff, and he remembered that when I first met him, I was talking about that, and he was like, "Jack, I need to take you down to see this band called Bluestone Union." I was like, "What are they?" Instantly, the Union made me think of like, the Union Jack or like British Invasion. He was like, "They play all the music you love." So it was these guys who are, I later found out were like affiliated with the choir who did It's Cold Outside and affiliated with all of that scene, which I'm once getting into that scene, I was able to meet all those guys. But I just remember going as a 14-year-old kid, seeing this band playing Needles and Pins by the Searchers and being like, "Oh my God, this is a band playing the music that I love. This is so cool." And you would see people in their 70s ballroom dancing to it, and it was like so endearing. It felt like I was in a time warp. I was seeing people who probably danced just like that, but they were once my age, and now that's 50 years later, and they're still doing it. So it I get exactly what you were saying when you're talking about Summer 65. It was so many people, like they're all elderly, but it's so cool because they're going out and seeing the music still, and they're still so passionate about it.
Yeah, I've never had a bad time playing those gigs.
Yeah.
It's always been a blast. And actually filling in those gigs is what gave me my appreciation for the Beatles, because like where you're saying you came in and you were almost before Beatles and then worked your way up, like I got into rock and roll watching MTV. So I saw Tommy Lee in a drum cage spinning
You saw
around.
him spinning. You were like, that's the way drums should be.
So, and I worked my way backwards. So then I got to like Led Zeppelin, and as a drummer, I'm like, Bonham's doing this.
Yeah. Oh,
full on in love with
Bonham's the
Bonham.
best rock drummer of all
So
time.
when people would talk about the Beatles, I was like, have you never heard of Led Zeppelin?
It was just like, why would you listen to the Beatles when you got Zeppelin?
I was writing it off, and then when I got to hear it in the context of it, the peers of the Beatles,
So
like I was like,
tasteful playing.
oh, okay, like this is something that was completely revolutionary, and then I could see exactly how this led to everything that came afterwards.
100%.
And it got me, and it was great because then all of a sudden I'm like, I have a new old band to fall in love with, you know?
And that's, I wish every once in a while, I wish that I could listen to the Beatles and discover them for the first time. I wish that I could give myself amnesia. Not really, but I always feel when you get somebody turned on to the Beatles who's never heard them before, they always say like, do they have a lot of good material? I'm like, you have no idea. This will be the most enriching musical appreciation you will ever experience. If you really dig this, you're gonna love it because they just evolved.
I'll tell you what, in the spatial audio, I got a nice set of headphones, and Abbey Road in spatial audio is absolutely ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dad.
We're drinking some Collision Bend again today.
Yeah. But as far as all the spatial audio songs that I've heard, and I've been listening to a lot of it because it sounds phenomenal for all these things. But Abbey Road is my favorite so far.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of
the Sun in spatial is wonderful, and you hear the blah da 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 da. It goes
especially
so
that comes in after She's So Heavy. You have
it's
that
like
just
this light of feeling. Yeah.
It feels like the sun's really coming in.
I'm so left out. You're gonna have to let me borrow those headphones.
for
It makes
sure.
you believe in it. And I was lucky to have really, really good headphones because the program, which again, with the David Kennedy connection, the program that I was in for school required that we have really nice Audio Technica M70X headphones, which are like the best way I can describe them. They are perfect for what you're talking about because you listen to a song in headphones and you don't really notice that even with headphones, they color the sound a lot. Like I've listened to my dad's headphones and I listen to it and you hear a blend, but what's so unique about these headphones, and they were really expensive, so I'm really fortunate to even have them, is that when you listen to music, you don't hear the blend. Like they were specifically designed to be so good at splitting the frequencies that when you listen to it, you hear if you want to just focus on the bass, you don't hear the other instruments blended with it. You just hear the bass.
Yeah.
Like they're so good, and I think my dad could attest to this. Like when you listen to mixes with it and you're focusing on instrument, like you hear the separation of sound between each instrument. Like everything in that song is like isolated, but it's all still together at the same time. It's really crazy, but I remember hearing Here Comes the Sun through those headphones, and it blew my mind. I was like, wow, that is insane that we can take a 50-year-old song and engineer it this way, and it sounds this revolutionary still. It's basically, the Beatles 50 years on, still pioneering, still revolutionary.
Yeah.
But, you learn a new appreciation for what you were going with. I feel like until people actually listen to the songs and listen to that stuff and actually are in an environment where you have to play it, they don't realize just how integral Ringo's drumming was and how like it mattered, and again because people bash Ringo for whatever reason that I don't even know, because I've grown up so much with his drumming that I don't even know why people bash him. But
it's not complicated enough. Like they think there's so much
music has to be a
music
challenge.
has to be
it has to be a million notes per second.
It doesn't have all these parts. There's no integrity to it. Like, are you serious? Like
it's crazy, man. Because then again, you look at David Gilmour. How do you compare a guy like David Gilmour to a guy like Eddie Van Halen, who played a million notes per second? David Gilmour, who could play the same thing but in 2 notes, and it would just be just as felt as Eddie Van Halen. There is a feel aspect to it, and
I'd argue more emotion, more expression in David Gilmour's playing.
Exactly, and it's one of those things that, listening to Ringo's drumming and being influenced by that, when I got into The Who, Keith Moon was a whole new realm, and I got into that whole era of power pop, and naturally, knowing The Who, and again, once I got into The Who, being with my evolution of drums, pretty much is my way of getting into new bands. Dig the drummer, I'll probably dig the band that he was in. I got into the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And Mitch Mitchell was probably the drummer that I was like, he plays the most like how I play.
Yeah.
He could be very, very tight and very concise. He was basically a controlled Keith Moon, is the best way to say. He could play everything Keith Moon plays, or pretty darn close to it, but he did it in a more controlled manner. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I say with whatever group you're playing, it depends. With The Who, they fostered off of that whole like controllable chaos sound. But with Jimi Hendrix, he could do chaos, but when he wanted to go into a verse, everything was tight and bam, he was in there. And the drumming was tamed down, and then you see him in those little things, because he's doing this type of stuff, and he's going, he's doing that type of stuff, But, I'd say for this album, for my influences, I think it really comes down to a Buddy Holly type songwriting approach, to where it's like, I'm doing all the E's, all the A's, and all the B's, but I'm doing it in a way that I think feels very honest, and I'm not trying to musically challenge anybody. I'm just trying to make a really fun pop album, a really fun pop rock album. And with the Beatles, all my progressions, if I'm in the key of E, I'm gonna hit a C sharp minor somewhere. I'm gonna hit a relative minor. I'm gonna hit a walk down progression somewhere. And I'm going to have a bridge to where it hits that minor chord, and then like C sharp minor to F to B7. I use a lot of sevens on all my passing chords. Instead of just the B's, I'm always doing B7s, A7s, G7s, just to give it that extra like old-timey feel that I feel like that's an understated part of Beatles songs, that like if you want to make a song sound like a Beatles song without even really trying, seventh chords, easy go-tos, because
after you've already hit the true major,
the relative minors. And then like I always say again, I was gonna try not to talk so much about the Beatles, but again, why not? Because it's so much involved in what my music sounds like and what I'm passionate about. So naturally, if I explain a Beatles trope that I like, you can expect to hear it on the album when you're looking for it. Is that on one of their songs, my favorite Beatles song in the world. All right, let's start this now. What's your favorite Beatles song, Chuck, and why?
Actually, She's So Heavy is mine, and I guess that was the last one they actually recorded together too.
It was.
Just that ending, that loop, and the build up on it just has me hooked. Like
It's
I'm like,
so
that is the
cool.
greatest. That's a progression for me that just like I love it.
My dad just found out recently. I was listening to that with my dad, and the solo, that really creamy, like that really creamy jazz tone that he has, which is heavily saturated. It almost sounds like the Eric Clapton Woman tone, because it's like all the tone rolled off.
Yeah.
It's very creamy. And he was like, who is playing this? Because of course my dad knows the Beatles even more than I do. His guitar playing, he naturally would have assumed it was George Harrison. I was like, no, that's John Lennon playing that. And I was just like, wow, I garnered a new appreciation for John Lennon's playing. He could be very expressive when he wanted to be too,
Yeah.
But that was just a really great song. I love that song. You like the Beatles?
Oh yeah, my very first album that my mom gave me was Rubber Soul.
Wow.
I think I was 12 years old or 11 maybe, and I hadn't picked up a guitar yet. I was still on piano.
Wow.
But that opened up my world a lot.
Wow.
Was Rubber Soul. So I'd have to say it's my favorite album just because of the foundation
Nostalgia and
music
everything.
and that too. But my favorite songs are like all over the whole catalog. I really appreciate both eras, but like there's more than the two eras.
Yeah.
Like the two
big eras of like their early. I feel like what you were saying, Rubber Soul. That's like the very like
That's right in the middle.
right in the middle.
Yeah, they're
you couldn't get more in the
Revolver,
middle.
yeah.
You couldn't get more in the middle of their
Right
career
in
than
the
Rubber
middle.
Soul. That's really the turning point to where their albums became art.
So Something is probably my favorite Beatles song.
Wow.
Yeah, and but it's hard to say like what your favorite is, because like tomorrow it might be something different.
Yeah.
I really love Ticket to Ride. I
Yeah.
really.
Oh, so you liked that little
Yeah, I love that. I love the early hits. I love Help, and I love.
Because they're great pop songs. At the
Oh,
end of the
yeah.
day, they were so good at writing great hooks.
Yeah.
Like they were just tunesmiths to like that degree, And I
Yeah.
feel like that's underrated, is that everybody focuses on like the experimental side of their career, and everybody talks about like how groundbreaking like their songs were longer. They started doing more recording techniques, and like people focus on that. And I feel like what I've noticed, or I guess I should preface, this is what I've noticed from a young person's perspective, like going through high school and seeing fans of the Beatles, how they look at it versus how I've maybe some people who actually have like grown up more with it and stuff, is that they tend to appreciate more of like the experimental stuff. Like if they say like the Beatles, they're like, oh yeah, because they were groundbreaking, they pioneered stereo, their songs were longer, they started adding like all this psychedelic stuff, and like
that second half, sorry to cut you off, that is more unique.
Exactly.
The sound, you hear the early stuff, you hear that influence in so much in every decade of music.
Yeah.
But then when you get like 65 to 70
it
or
really,
whatever, like that's okay, this is like basically a different band.
Oh yeah, they sound
like when you get towards it,
different.
because In My Life is one of my other favorite ones,
Yeah.
and like Let It Be and Yesterday, like that's later, but it's pop, like good stuff.
It is,
but, and I think that was actually all it was going
Oh yeah. what I think's cool too, because I love. I don't want to sound like a later period Beatles hater. I love all of it. Like I'm in love with all of it. They're the only band that I generally can say that I've been completely in love with for pretty much my whole life, And it's what I was gonna say is that like I feel like when you listen even to their early stuff, like the really early stuff, the pioneering or revolutionary things were always there with their music. It was just more subtle, or it was something that was like, again, like in that leap with Rubber Soul and everything, the big changes became bigger, but like the seventh chords, like I feel like the real genius of the Beatles in their early years, like in their later years, it was more, they just grew. But in their early years, I think they were just, their mastery came because they were really good tunesmiths.
Yeah.
They knew how to craft a really catchy hook. They knew how to write lyrics. Like, again, I'm going to bring up my dad a lot, but he pretty much got me into all of this stuff. Like they were brilliant masters of writing lyrics that were so simple but still told stories and were still like didn't come off as corny. Like, again, people are going to be like, the older generation was just like, oh, this yeah music, but they had a way to make it sound fresh. They could be repetitive, but at the same time you weren't getting sick of it because George Harrison would play these interesting chords under it that every time they said a different he's moving up slightly on the neck, he's doing other chords. So like it's not just the same as with the E's. He's doing the first as an E, the second as an E7, the third like there's so many little tricks to all of their songs that, again, I'm going off a little bit on this, but trust me, when you listen to my album, you'll hear all the stuff I'm talking about. Is that, I guess, to go along to, and that was really awesome, by the way. That's a really awesome song, Something. I love it. And
I think that was Frank Sinatra's favorite.
Exactly.
Beatles song.
And I think that's both picks are from 1969. Yes. On both, are they both off? Yeah, they're both off of Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess I'm to go 180 to that, which that's probably the greatest pop album ever made. I think nowadays, again, I feel like most of today's generation that are kind of under the realization that like what I've noticed is that Sgt. Pepper's kind of waning is the masterpiece that people always said it was. And I still think it's an utter masterpiece. But what I've noticed is like the hype from 67's kind of dying down, and nowadays most people my age tend to be picking Abbey Road as their masterpiece because it's got enough of everything. It's got the catchiness of the songs, but it's got the interesting production, but they're all just really good crafted songs.
Yes.
So like,
see, Evan, my younger generation likes Abbey Road.
They do. Abbey Road is by far is considered now the masterpiece of the Beatles. If you talk to people my age, they tend to say it's Abbey Road. But with me, sorry if I'm gonna cut you off, I guess my personal favorite song would be the second cut off of their second album with the Beatles, All I've Got to Do. I and I love that song. And basically,
were they still doing mostly covers they were recording on that time?
Yeah, they had, I think it was 6 covers and 8 originals, and it was the same thing they did for those first 2 albums.
Meet the Beatles and
Please Me,
Please
and then
Me.
yeah.
Okay.
And I love With the Beatles, because With the Beatles was the first Beatles album that I actually grew up with. It was the first CD, the first time I ever had a document, like, recording that was mine of the Beatles, was my late grandmother, Judith. She gave me that for my 9th birthday, and it was a CD of, like, the 2009 remaster. I think it just came out then, of With the Beatles. And so I always grew up with the British. Like, my dad, he had the same type of experience, but it was with Meet the Beatles, like you were saying, which I guess I can say that I've always grown up with the British copies of the albums. So with the British copies, it opens up with It Won't Be Long, and I'm like, this is a great song. I love this.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, exactly. It won't be long now. Yeah. It won't be. I love that. And then I just remember, and I went through a period to where I'll confess, because this guy is brilliant and I love his music, but I used to skip the Paul songs to go straight to the John songs, because I don't know why, I was in love with John Lennon's voice. Still am. It's a lifelong love. But
me too. It got me. Well, I was born in '85, so when I was really getting into music, Oasis was huge, and like that was the closest I got to hear of like John Lennon's voice.
Oh yeah, Liam Gallagher trying to
new
emulate
songs
it.
And like similar songwriting and similar lyrics, and so they became a huge influence of mine.
Oh yeah, and my bandmate who's also a songwriting partner, he and I can write stuff together. His second favorite band is Oasis for the very reason you just said. It was like Beatles 2.0, but like fresh ideas with it.
Oh yeah,
and so
those first 2 albums were heavy for me.
Oh
like,
yeah,
on what I became.
On, that is so awesome.
Yeah, they were my favorite band for a while, and then like Foo Fighters, and we're way up there, in Nirvana and. Chili Peppers. Let's see. I was really into Incubus too. Oasis. But cheers to them again.
Cheers to them. And I saw so quickly. My favorite song is "All I've Got to Do" by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. My favorite Beatles song. My favorite song ever is "Waterloo Sunset" by the Kinks. But the Beatles.
I was going to ask you about the Kinks. That's
awesome. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That is definitely my favorite song ever at this point. But yeah, All I've Got to Do, for the reason that I always tell the same joke with my dad, is that we play that song live in our acoustic sets, and what I love about it is that the Beatles trick. I think my favorite Beatles instrument trope that they do, because they've got vocals, tropes and stuff, is that if the Beatles are playing, like if they're in the key of E, and you're going to F sharp minor for the "and call you on the phone and you'll come running home," and then they go to A. If it was the Hollies that were doing it, they would have just played A. But the Beatles have to play A minor, so it's got that like other sense of longing. Like it still just makes you yearn for that. And then instead of going to the B, it's the B7. That's like they
still put the C natural in the melodies.
Oh yeah, they still did that. And it was like, what I love is that like it's got everything that the Beatles. That for me, I feel like it at that point is the song that captures everything that I like about the Beatles. It's got an interesting drum beat. It's got like that cool drum beat that just kind of goes through it, and then you got Paul playing one of the first known uses of chords on a bass for a pop album, which is totally cool. So he's being revolutionary on the bass like he was. Got great harmonies with George and Paul backup. You got a great Lennon vocal, and you got it's just a really cool 2-minute song that just I feel captures everything that I use in my music. Yeah. But to really quick touch on what you mentioned, you said Foo Fighters. Mm-hmm. I was gonna say my little experience with the Foo Fighters, for people wondering, just because Taylor Hawkins was a really cool influence for me, and he was a really great drummer. I managed to meet him and actually had a really fun time hanging out with him before he died, because I went to see them play at the House of Blues.
That House of Blues show.
And I couldn't get into the actual show. I remember we couldn't really get tickets for that. It was sold out so quickly.
It was sold out by the time I found out about it.
Was the same case.
Which was like 90 minutes after they announced it.
That was the exact. It was so depressing because I remember my mom saw it and I saw that came out, and as Mom was trying to buy the tickets, it sold out.
My buddy sent me a post, like, with just the Foo Fighters Instagram post, like, and I'm like, dude, that's a fake. That's fake. I would have known about that. And like House of Blues, that's way too small for them. And then I looked. Oh, sweet, sold out. Okay.
Sweet. And then, of course, I did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I did the same thing where I was just like, I never would have.
My savings.
Yeah, it was one of those things that as soon as it was sold out, I was just like, well. It's like I never heard it was happening. I tried to block it out. But my mom, being the awesome mom that she is, was like, you know what we're going to do? And there's plenty of cases of her doing these cool things. I'd say most of my fortuitous events happen from my mom just having that kind of third eye look that like, no, if, you never know who Jack might run into. He just needs to be at that environment and we'll just take it from there. So she got us together to go down to see the show, and we went to the restaurant, which was attached to the other side. So naturally, we're eating French fries out of a bowl while hearing the drums and everything right on the other side of the wall, and just thinking like, oh, I'd love to be back there, but they have this big guy who's just like, no one's getting back here.
Yeah.
Classic bouncers. It's just like I'm basically a twig. Like if I ever tried anything, boom, there goes one shoulder, there goes the other shoulder. But anyway, I just had the feeling that, if I'm there at the actual venue, anything could happen. Like immediately I'm thinking I'm probably not going to make the show. There's no way I can probably sneak in. But, when the show's over and there's the flood of people coming out, that's usually a time when you can start to capitalize on stuff. So naturally that happened. I recognized, or again, kudos to my mom, she looked over and there was Tim Parnan, who's from the Rock Hall, who's the mutual Rock Hall friend that I have through the garage and through all of that stuff. And he was walking kind of fast, and I was like, hey, Jack, isn't that Tim Parnan? I'm like mid-French fry. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Tim Parnan. So I go run after him, and we talk and chat a little bit, and this is where he becomes a GOAT. I feel like if I had to pick the moment in my eyes that he ascended to legend status, it would have to be this moment right here. So Tim Parnan, if you're listening to this, you're a legend for this big reason why. So naturally, there's an elevator and everybody's coming out and going up to the third floor, and I didn't even know that the band was going to be in this like VIP room or anything like that. So I'm talking with Tim, and like the foundation room, yeah. And what ended up happening was this group of CEOs and VIPs, all wearing their fancy suits and stuff, are all about to get up there. And Tim has the ability to go up there because he got in there through the Rock Hall. And I look over at him and I'm just like, are you going up there? And he was like, nah, I don't need to go up there. But he was like, but you should. And I'm like, really? And I look over there, and you can see the bouncer who's like getting suspicious now. So he's just like, okay, what's about to happen? So naturally, he just says, go, Jack, go. And he kind of pushes me into the group of people. So now I'm in with this group of people, and I didn't really see the show except just maybe got lucky and saw a few of the songs performed with the door open. So I could see Taylor Hawkins playing for a little bit. So that snippet that I saw him at was very priceless information to use to get into the elevator, because I knew that these guys are going to get suspicious. So I was just like, how was that Foo Fighters show? And they were like, oh, it was awesome, man. It was great. And I was like, man, Taylor Hawkins, Young Man Blues, that Who cover, awesome. And when you get in there, you're like, this is great. And I remember the woman at the door said, but she looked at me and was just like, are you 21? And I was like, no, I'm 22. And she looked over and she was like, all right, get in. It was the best white lie I ever did. A lot of kids use that lie to get convenience store alcohol. I used it to go try to meet the Foo Fighters. So I feel like that was an okay time to lie, because little did I know, I'm at the foundation room and I see Dave Grohl all the way across the hall, and he's got a swarm of people around him. So I'm just like, yeah, if I even get close to Dave Grohl, it would probably be like, oh, hi, and nothing would come really out of it. There would be no like actual fun experience with him because he's so big that everybody wants to see Grohl. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go try to find some of the other members. That was the clever thing to do, I think. So I went downstairs, and as I'm going down the hallways, going down the steps, Taylor Hawkins and Pat Smear come walking up there. I'm like, oh, this is almost too perfect. I'm like, in that moment, I was just like, my heart was beating a million miles per second. I just look over, I'm just like, hey, Taylor. And he's walking, he's like, looks at me like this. I'm just like, you killed it, man. My hero, you killed it. And he just looked over at me, and I happened to be wearing a Rock Hall shirt. So he actually thought that I was there because this is funny because he must have thought I was affiliated, like I got there for the Rock Hall, when in fact I didn't even have a ticket to be there. So he sees my Rock Hall shirt and he just looks down at it for a second and then runs up to me and gives me a huge bear hug and lifts me off of the ground. And he's all sweaty and everything. I'm just like, wow, this is cool. He's kind of gross. It smelled. And he had these like Eddie Van Halen shorts that were like, if you see video of it now, and it's all, you see stuff on Twitter of it, he's wearing these Eddie Van Halen like guitar type, like his guitar, but on his shorts. So I remember what he was wearing and stuff. It's like in my memory. But he was just like, he was just so genuine. Like when Taylor Hawkins passed away, that was, I think, like in a similar way to like how my parents must have felt when Cornell passed away. But I actually think that it hurt more than Cornell for me because it was the first time that I actually had a celebrity die who I actually got to spend like an hour with intimately, like talking and like learning like stuff about his music. And he bought me a drink. He bought me like a I think it was either a Shirley Temple or I forgot what it was because I had a gin and tonic later that night from somebody else, but you know, it was just totally cool, and he talked with me and I got to ask him some questions about, like, you know, how's the band doing and everything. And he did that classic thing that he walked right in the doorway and everybody looked at him and he went, Day-o, and did that, like, Freddie Mercury thing. Yeah. And it was so cool. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, this guy has that same quality like all these other guys had, like Keith Moon, like Freddie, to where, like, you're the life of the party as soon as they come. And, you know, it kind of broke my heart a little bit when I heard that he passed away, knowing that he was like...
You saw him a second time, didn't you?
I did, and I'll allude to that in a little bit. It was really kind of amazing that, you know, this guy who, you know, I'm a young guy, I'm a young 20-year-old at this moment, or I think I was just 20 when this happened. And, you know, what always stuck with me when I left that night was just how genuine he was. That, like, you know, you see videos of people meeting people, and they always say, like, don't meet your heroes, don't meet people. But, like, I go up there, and, like, people are swarming Dave Grohl, and here I am talking with Taylor Hawkins, and, like, there's maybe two other people by me, you know. And Pat Smear, he was cool, too, but Taylor was... Pat was kind of more on the shy, reserved side, and Taylor was this extrovert that, like... He was the one guy who had more energy than me that night. And I just fed off of that. I was just like, I was pumped up, and like every once in a while I'd just jump up and like high five him and stuff and be like, yeah, Rock Hall. Like, he just loved that he was in the Rock Hall. He just was so high on life that, like, when I was driving up to here with my dad today, and, you know, we were listening to radio and a Foo Fighters song played, and then, like, you know, the disc jockeys say something after, and they always say stuff along the lines of, like, you know, they always try to find some mystical reason as to, like, why he died. Like, you know, like, he probably knew he was getting a little disenchanted with the Foo Fighters, and, like, you can tell that's probably why he died and everything. I think, like, nah, I think it was just an overdose. Yeah. He was as high on life as he could be, and I'm sure other stuff. But he was so happy that, like, when you have these people trying to, like, say that, like, they almost try to, like, make his name seem like he wasn't in the band, wasn't happy.
I think Rolling Stone put out an article yesterday or today.
Yeah.
And they spun it off like that. And they were talking with, like, Chad Smith, and Chad's like, I thought we were just talking about Taylor. Like,
yeah, no,
being
that's
awesome.
That's classic Rolling Stone for you, classic Jan Wenner. is that they're gonna try to spin it in some way to make it seem as though, you know, like he was like a depressed soul, and they try to. I feel like they do the Kurt Cobain thing. They always try to make it like if there's a tragic death, they try to make it seem in a similar vein, like, you know, he was just disenchanted with the music, disenchanted with all this stuff.
He was finally going to tell Dave he was going to leave the band. Like they had that in there, and
there was
Chad
no
Smith's
way.
like, no, that wasn't happening.
You know, that's not gonna. And that's when I heard that in the car on the way to this podcast. I looked over at my dad. I was just like, yeah, no, this is bull crap. There's no way. Like, and that's just coming from even just the hour that I got to like be around him and in that environment. There was not a depressed bone in that man's body that night. And I'm sure if he was dealing with other stuff, none of it would have been big enough to where he was just like, you know, I need to kill myself or do stuff like that. I sincerely think it was the Keith Moon effect or the John Bonham effect of just partying a little too hard and being 50 and having a heart that was 300 milligrams bigger than it should have been. It's going to kill you. You know, rock and roll, you'll be on the top of the world, you'll be great. But if you do all those substances, you're going to die at 50, you know, and that's why I don't do drugs. That's why I don't do any of that stuff. Because I want to be around for a while.
You know what you should do?
I had just seen that Studio 666 movie.
It's so
It was so hilarious.
It's so funny. And every time, I just love that scene where you have Taylor at the drums and he's playing a bunch of stuff and Dave Grohl's just like, no, do it again. And he's like, keeps doing that. He's just like, why? And then all of a sudden, he's like, are you okay, Dave? Like, there's something off, but he's so scared to say anything. And then Dave just looks over at him. He's just like, you're going to do it the way I want it to be. And he's
I'm
got, like,
Dave Grohl.
Yeah, he's got these, like, evil face. Yeah, he's just like, I'm Dave Grohl. If I want to replace you and play the drums myself, I can. It's a pleasure for you to play drums for me. Like, he makes the jokes like
so
that.
Funny.
It's so
the
good.
biggest rock star in the world.
Yeah, it's basically like, if to anybody wondering, I'm sure you know, it's basically like The Shining, but with the Foo Fighters. It's so funny because like
a lot gorier.
A lot gorier. Like you see their keyboardist. I think he gets like his head shredded or something. I forgot exactly.
Oh yeah. He's having sex with Whitney Cummings, and they like cuts them both in half.
Yeah, he has a saw that goes right through the.
Oh, sorry for the spoiler.
No, that's all right.
We need to take a second.
Don't worry,
I'm sorry.
it's just the keyboardist.
Yeah, I was gonna
Hey,
say,
Ron-
Get rid of him right away.
No, Rami's awesome. He was in the Wallflowers.
He
did
was
that
awesome.
Iconic stuff in One
Yeah.
Headlight that we love.
I was gonna segue from the healthy living straight here into
That's
unrefined.
right. Yeah. Let's thank a couple of our sponsors. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to do it fast.
We gotta talk about you too.
Yeah,
We've been talking about the
Unrefined.
Beatles this whole time.
Unrefined CLE on Instagram, unrefinedls.com. 100% gluten and dairy-free meal prep service in Cleveland, using local vendors and ingredients for their products, and their food is always fresh, never frozen. Meals are delivered right to your door within 35 miles of downtown or pick up in Ohio City. Enter the code CS20 to allow 20% off your first order. Let's also thank Mr. Chuck Kaminsky from Basement Trader, basementtrader.com. That's BASSMENTTRADER.com. And you can check out his reverb store for cool old guitars and basses, and his other reverb store for accessories and amps. He'll buy, sell, and trade and repairs, and he's setting up a few of my guitars right now. Thank you very much. Yeah. Fixing my awesome Martin acoustic that I miss so much. BasementTrader.com, reverb.com/shop/basementtrader.
That was pretty smooth there, man.
Wow,
You sound professional.
That was professional delivery, man.
I mean, I feel like I've said that how many times? What this is
29?
about to be episode 30 or something?
Something
29.
like that, 29 or 30, yeah, somewhere around there.
Cool. Let's also shout out listencle.com. They have an entire database of Cleveland musicians and playlists that are mood-based instead of genre-based, full of Cleveland artists. Go to listencle.com. If you're an artist or musician yourself, you can follow their steps to get into their database, and you can use that as your electronic press kit to get gigs booked.
Oh, you had it going, man. You had it going.
Train wreck at the end.
So
listencle.com.
This is Evan practicing for his solo running of the show here.
What are you talking about?
Well, I will be voyaging across the sea like
He's gonna
Fievel,
be
but
in
the other
lovely
way.
Italy.
Oh, yeah. We got a few more episodes left of the duo combination of
I'll
Chuck
be popping
Schilling
in
and
every
Evan
once
Stone.
in a while, though. I'll be
I'm glad
popping
I'm
in.
glad I got to be here with you guys.
Yeah,
I'm glad too,
I'm very
man.
lucky.
I'll admit,
Version
I'm a
1.0.
little nervous. I do not have as close to the gear knowledge that Chuck here does. So I'm gonna have to do a lot of research.
You'll be just fine, man.
Your end of it.
Notes.
Know a lot about the Beatles, and I feel like that's all you guys really needed to know. Like, you're trying to learn what the artist is gonna talk about. You're just like, all right, if we just know anything about the Beatles, we go off of that.
Kent State and the Beatles.
Kent
We're
State,
good.
and the Beatles. Yeah, that's me.
So let's wish good luck to Chuck Schilling and his voyage, and I'll be bringing in guest co-hosts, or maybe looking for a permanent one, or just doing it myself. We'll see. We'll try a few different things, but the Cleveland music scene shall shine on through this.
Absolutely.
podcast.
I'll be keeping an eye from over there, and it'd be so cool to get some Cleveland artists over into Italy.
Yeah, maybe we'll call you in a couple times.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be here 4 times a year for sure. Every quarter for my wife's work.
All right. So maybe after 3 years we'll be back.
Yeah. I got a 3-year visa going. Who knows what happens? So
right.
let's go. What instruments you play? We got to get into gear.
All
we got to
right.
get
You know
into.
what?
We got a lot to fit into this last 15
Yeah, we are gonna
minutes.
this is the.
All right. Long story short, Taylor was awesome, and Rip Taylor. I hope you're somewhere in
Taylor.
the universe. You know, you are
Yes,
Taylor.
spelled
Oh,
R.I.P.
the Rip Taylor guy.
How'd we get there?
That's funny. But anyway, you know, he was a great drummer, and you know, don't believe everything they say about him.
Yeah.
But let's move on to your question, the gear that I use. For this album, if there was one instrument that I say defines the album all along, it's a toss up between the drums that I try to do a Keith Moon type delivery on the drums, and I employ 12-string electric guitar on the entire album, on every single song.
All right.
There's jangly, ringing 12-string.
And what kind of 12-string are you using there?
So for most of the album, I've been using a Dan Electro 12, and just recently through my mutual contact with Bluestone Union, who naturally know all those old guys because they are older guys, I've been in an acquisition currently using an old Rickenbacker C63, not C old Rickenbacker 360 12-string in blonde. It's basically the McGuinn guitar.
Yeah.
And I've been employing that on. I'm using it more as ornamental stuff. You know, I'm not going to replace everything the Dano did because, you know, it did well with what it did. But these past few days, pretty much what I've been doing is just adding, and it's kind of like the ornamental garnish to the songs, if you will. The Ricky 12 really makes things pop.
Yeah.
And it's a great sounding guitar, and I frankly have to pinch myself every time I play it. I'm like, wow, I'm playing an old Rickenbacker. Like, this is unbelievable. This is a guitar that I cannot even get close to affording. And shout out to Norm Isaac from Blue Evolution now. He's a real awesome guy, and he basically gave me the guitar saying that, you know, just as long as you keep it in the case and when you're done with it and you keep it in the studio, just let me know when the album's finished. Have free reign to use it.
Very
and he
cool.
basically said that I have like a library book pass to that guitar. And, you know, I think that's kind of what my album is. You're going to listen to a lot of Buddy Holly mixed with Beatles. So you got the song, you got the simplicity. If I had to really break it down, my lyrics and all that, it's the simplicity of Buddy Holly with chord changes, very Beatlesque, with drumming and power of like the early mod era Who, with the and I'd say with the what was I gonna say, with the 12-string of like Pete Townsend and all of that. I feel like that's kind of where my sound is. It's all, if you had to pick, it's kind of like a homologation. Like, it'll sound melody-wise straight out of like 1966.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's, you know, that's kind of the sounds like I was saying that I'm influenced by, and I don't hear much of that stuff now, like, or new stuff I should say. You know, what I've kind of noticed is that when you listen to the and the bass playing, I should say, I want to give a shout out to a man named Jeff Beam, who basically let me borrow his P-bass, his Fender P-bass, for the recording, so I was able to get really nice thumping bass on it. But I tried playing it. You're gonna get busy bass playing. It's gonna be very busy. Okay. There's a lot of I'm doing a lot of like scales and a lot of ionic all over that album, and I feel like if I think about it, I think I'm satisfied with the way it sounds.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting blend, and the music will be very fun live because at the end of the day, a lot of the new artists that I see who are my age are very laid back, and I'm very the opposite. I'm not an introvert. I'm not shy. I have a ton of energy, and I was like, you know what? Why don't I just be unashamedly me on this album and just take all the influences I like, all the music I like, and just pepper the whole album with it and go out and play it like that. So I think, it's pretty much how the album's going to be. I'm going to play the album and have a lot of energy while doing it.
All right. Can't wait to hear it, man.
What are you singing about?
This is where, you're gonna hear it and it'll be the classic, like, oh, he's singing about a girl, he's singing about this. And like, I wish I had a girl right now that I could sing about, but in reality, they're all about my dogs.
Awesome.
They're all about Archie and May. They're, if I just substitute, like, in my thought, trying to think of like girl running through a field. Oh, well, I'll see May running through the field. I'll just think about how happy she looks and how she's catching the ball and being so happy, and like, it's just, I love my dogs. I'm sure they love me. So
cool.
It's the easiest thing to write about.
Yeah.
Beach Boys sing about cars and girls and, sing about dogs.
Yeah, what's the Zeppelin song? I can only think of the line is "Ain't
Black
no
dog.
companion like a blue-eyed Merle" is about his dog.
Yeah.
I can't think of the.
Martha, my dear.
Boom, 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 boom.
When you find yourself in the thick of it, help yourself to a little what is all around you, you silly girl. Like, that's all about his sheepdog,
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that, again, goes with the honesty of what I'm conveying. I could have been writing about a girl, but, to be truthful, I'm not in a relationship, and I don't really have anybody that drives me wild like that. So what drives me wild? Getting home and seeing my two dogs running towards me, and just, it's easy. It's easy to write about that stuff.
Cool. One more time on the release dates, the release show, the location, the opening bands.
All right.
Let's give that a big plug.
Let's do that really quick, because that is what I'm very excited about. So, if you want to catch the pre-release show, basically the dress rehearsal, so we'll see how we go. Hopefully it's all right. It'll be this Saturday, on the Saturday, and it's the Willoughby Rib Burn-Off. If any of you guys want to see that, go ahead. But
they'll have to go back in time.
They will. Yeah. They will. Oh, yeah, they will.
Boy, those ribs were good, weren't
exactly. Those ribs, oh, man, those ribs were delicious, man. That was great. That band sucked, but they were really good. But
Does your band go by your name?
Yeah, for this will be Jack McLaughlin and the Optimists.
All right.
And the release date of the album will probably be within this weekend. Will probably be around Saturday or Sunday. So, again, by the time you're hearing this, the album should be released. If it's not, it'll be soon. And the
release show.
The release show would be June 1st.
Cool. You'll be able to catch that after listening to this podcast.
Yes, you will. June 1st. June 1st at the Grog Shop. I will be playing the whole album from start to finish with some covers paying homage to some of the special guests who have motioned that they want to come. So, again, that would be wonderful. And then to give a little plug about the bands, I have a really great duo of bands coming who are opening for this. I'll start with the Vums, and they all go to my school. Both of the main members of each band are friends at my recording arts school, so it was really easy for me to find top quality musicians to open up for it. The Vums, they're a great pop rock band. They give me a very Violent Femmes meet like. I'd say Violent Femmes meet, kind of like Jack White. It's like Violent Femmes meet Jack White. They're very poppy, but they have like really good melodies also at the same time. And they're like garagey, but I think their harmonies are too good to be categorized as garage. Long story short, they're very awesome, and you guys should see the opening bands because you won't be disappointed. Then that leads me to the next band, which is Low Spot.
It reminds me of Jet with the sound you just
yeah,
described.
they're very much like that. Good call. Then Low Spot. Low Spot came about is that Low Spot was the first band I called to just because I needed to my band originally bailed, who I had opening for me. So naturally, the person who I go to school with and work on projects with, name is Ian Douglas. Shout out to Ian Douglas. You're awesome because he made these.
Ooh, nice.
So, exactly.
And they're very 60s looking.
They are. Yeah, he's very talented. But he mentioned earlier that he had a power pop type band that was along the lines of like Matthew Sweet and the Replacements and that style of stuff. So I was always intrigued by that. And the Stone Roses he told me about. They're kind of like the Stone Roses, which naturally I got excited. I was like, that's a band that influenced Oasis, so that's got to be cool. And let him know, and he was like, yeah, Jack, I'm on that. And not only has he been passionate about playing that gig, he's gone the extra mile and printed out flyers and like promotionalized and made stickers of it. You know, you can get a low spot sticker when you're there. I would advise doing that because honestly, if he put that much effort and time and passion into opening for my show, you can bet that his band's going to be fabulous.
How many people in your band?
In my band, I've got some really tasty players for it. We're a 4-piece. I'm going to be playing rhythm guitar and vocals. And then I've got Calen Foster is his name, realistically. And he's a really good musician all around. He actually released his debut album in February. He's 17.
Wow.
And he sounds just like the stuff that I was just talking about. He maybe even has a little bit of Todd Rundgren and Alex Chilton in him. He's very he's very talented. But he's going to be playing bass for that show and singing harmony with me, which is I'm really jazzed about because anytime we get together, it's like we end up just collaborating really well together. It's just like it's like a glove, you know. And he's learning all those songs because he lives down in Columbus. He hasn't really been at any of the practices, but also when you're dealing with pro musicians, you know, it's really easy to send them the stems, send them the recordings, and they pick up on it very fast. So I've got no reason to doubt that he'll be amazing. And that leads me to the drums. I have a guy named Justin Slike who is the mark of professionalism. He's like, if he's even 3 or 4 minutes late to practice, he's already sent you a text saying he's going to be late. Yeah. He is the epitome of what you can aspire to be a professional musician. You know, he comes in there, he listens to the songs, he comes in telling you which songs he knows right off the bat and which ones he's practiced, so he doesn't try to like practice any of the songs that he already knows. He already knows them and he's get through that, and any of the songs that he doesn't know, he listens to it once, listens to it a second time, mix maps it, puts it up there, nails it. He's like, it's really an honor to play with a guy who's that professional. So, you know, he is very humble and he doesn't think highly of his playing, but that's all right because I think very highly of your playing. And sure, if you guys see the show, I'm not wrong. And that leads me to guitar. And one of the best guitarists that I've seen on the Cleveland scene, who's in a band called Mount Royal, they're very funky, groovy, you know, like kind of like Weather Report mixed with a little bit of Hendrix and all that. They're very cool. Is a guitarist by the name of Henry Laconte of the Agora fame. Like his grandfather ran the Agora and opened it 50 years ago. And, you know, if I ever want to see a really cool show, you know, it's pretty easy to see one when you got a friend like Henry. He's really cool and he's a really great guy. And he's also happens to be lightning on guitar. So I was like, you know, Henry, you want to play lead guitar for this? You know, because I know it's not your style of music. And he was like, right off the bat, he was like, yeah, that sounds like a fun time. I would love to back you up and support you. So when I think back on it now, I'm like, wow, I've got good players behind me. Now I really need to make sure I don't mess up because I might be the weak spot of this band. You know, everybody could release an album, but it would be probably better than mine. But being that they're supporting me, I feel like that will drive a fire in me and make me want to play even harder and better for the show. So if you guys come out and see me play, I'm going to be very honest and just try to play my best and give you guys a show that you guys will feel was worth the $8 to see.
Awesome. Well, Rhianna and I will be there for sure.
Well, thank you.
And can't wait to see that. Can we ask you one more question before we wrap up here?
That would be wonderful.
Can you give us a recommendation for a movie or a TV series?
That's a good one.
Let's get a couple since it's just you.
I'll give a couple movies. All right, I got a couple off the bat. First of all, I feel like the movie that has my favorite movie scene in a movie would have to be That Thing You Do, which is basically where I am in life right now. That excitement of like the new single coming out and the album. Like I am exactly at that period that the main characters in That Thing You Do, which is about a band trying to do an upcoming single and promote it and just try to make it, you know. And I say if I would have to pick, being that it's only just me, if I had to pick my favorite scene in that movie, without spoiling completely, there is a scene to where naturally if you're releasing a single, it's a big deal to hear it on the radio. It's a big deal. Like this right now, I'm kind of have to pinch myself that I'm actually get to talk to you guys in an interview format. It's like the coolest thing ever. I'm pinching myself now that I'm even doing this. But, you know, there's that scene to where they hear the song for the first time and they go crazy because they're like, oh my God, it's on. That's probably my favorite movie scene in any movie that I've seen because it just captures that feeling that I get. That's just like, oh my God, how cool would it be to hear your song on the radio? And like, it's just that excitement and feel and optimism and everything's fresh and like you haven't been jaded by the music industry, which is usually inevitable. But, you know, it's just that fresh outlook that like, you know, we're on the radio, we can do anything. That's kind of my favorite scene from a movie that's one of my favorites. And my second one, my favorite movie of all time, would have to be October Sky with Jake Gyllenhaal and I'm forgetting his name. It's the father's name. He's in the movie The Patriot and like a few other stuff.
Mel Gibson.
Yeah, not the other guy. He's like I'm trying to think. He's got. I could look it up soon, but either way.
Is Heath Ledger in The Patriot?
Heath Ledger is in The Patriot.
Mm-hmm.
It's
the other guy.
The other guy. The other guy.
He's super young in that one.
Yeah, this guy's. It's Jake Gyllenhaal. I think one of his if not his first, it's one of his very first. He's like 19 years old during it, who just plays a guy who's, you know, he's in a town. He's in Coalwood, West Virginia. So hence the name. They're basically in a coal mining town as it's dying because, you know, the Olga mine's kind of going, and he's a kid who, you know, unless you're really good at football or you're really good at mining coal, there's really no future for you. And this is a kid who wants to be a rocket scientist. I just always found that very, you know, inspiring, that given his limited abilities in terms of resources, if you have the drive, you can make it and do what you want to do. And he got together with his friends, built model rockets, and now retired as one of the lead guys of the space shuttle project down at NASA. So he went from being a young kid in Coalwood to where it looked like he was going to have to mine coal the rest of his life to, which is literally the great metaphor of it that my sister, who's really good at that type of stuff, would say, you know, Jack, he's, instead of being all underneath the ground, he's going up.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's true. He made it. You know, Homer Hickam made it. And I feel like, you know, if that guy can do that, like, I could do anything. You know, it comes down to drive, determination, and being a hard worker. I feel like talent only gets you so far. People say, like, oh, I'm not talented enough to do that. I'm just like, don't sell yourself short. They didn't get to where they are just because they're talented. They got to where they are because they were determined to exploit their talent and work very hard at doing so because they were passionate about it. And I feel like if 30 years from now, whether I make it or not in doing what I want to do, I just want to get to the point to where I can look back and say, you know, I tried hard. Yeah. I actually gave a shot at it. I tried to do what I want to do. And I feel like that's easier than saying, like, man, maybe I should have tried harder and done this, or maybe I should have, like, released an album, or maybe I should have done this. Instead, my goal is 30 years from now, regardless of where I am in life, to be able to look back and say, you know what, I gave it a shot.
Keep giving it a shot. Keep giving it a shot. You're going to start June 1st at the Grog Shop. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, you guys were great hosts and interviewees.
Cool. Well, thanks
thank you.
for.
It was an absolute pleasure to be able to sit and talk with you guys.
Yes.
Cool.
It was a
Thanks for
pleasure.
wearing your Beachland shirt at Pilgrimage, or else we would
That's
not be
all
here
it
right
started.
now.
That's all this all started.
Yep.
Cool.
I know. Thank my mom then. She had again.
Let's thank Cindy Barber from
Yeah.
the Beachland.
She's awesome too. Thank you.
Cool.
You're pretty much keeping Kathy Blackman, Cindy Barber, you guys are keeping Cleveland rock and roll alive.
Yes.
I would not be able to do what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you.
Cool.
Absolutely.
And same sentiments from us at Cuyahoga Sound Podcast. I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.